Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I'm your host, Esmeralda Zamora, here at the KXAN Live Studios with our KXAN Meteorologist Kristen Currie. Kristen, we're back with our Kristen's Classroom segment. How are you feeling?
Pretty good. It was a long morning, tracking some storms at early morning or late night, depending on how you look at it. But we got some good rain in the bucket, so I'm excited about that. I'm feeling pretty good after the morning round.
Yeah, Nick and I spoke yesterday afternoon about how important this rain is for summer fun, especially in the lake.
Yes.
How are we looking like so far? What is the update on that?
You know, every little bit helps because we're first trying to saturate the soils. And so once we get the ground full, a lot of that water can then run off into the rivers, into the lakes, where we can slowly but surely start to chip away at that drought and that deficit. Now, we wanted to make sure it doesn't come at once, or else we do run into the risk of flooding where we live here on land. And that's going to be a concern later on today. We've got a 3 out of 4 risk of seeing some flash flooding, just telling us there's going to be rain and a lot of it coming down quickly later on tonight. So that's the downside of it. But overall, you know, we are in this hole when it comes to our annual precipitation, our monthly precipitation. Obviously, the drought is obvious, not just in the soils, but in the lakes. So hoping for a little bit more.
Hoping. That's all we can do. Well, today we're not talking about our rainfall in the next couple of days, but we are talking about hurricane season lingo.
Yes, I figured, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about, like you mentioned, the storms over the next week, but we can't lose sight of the fact that it is still hurricane season. And oftentimes when we get towards the middle end of summer, we rely on tropics to potentially help us out with some rain. So I wanted to take the time now that the Atlantic is quiet, to go over some of those terms you might hear us talk about and just kind of say freely and thinking, wait, what does that mean? While it's quiet, so we have the time to kind of discuss what the different terms and phrases mean.
Yeah, and you published your article on this topic already. So as I was reading through it, I work with meteorologists every single day, and some of this lingo, I had no clue what it meant.
It's tough, yeah. And sometimes we get so excited about active weather, or we get so wrapped up in wanting to make sure people are safe. We just don't have the wherewithal to think, oh, maybe not everybody understands that. So that was kind of my goal today, is diving into what does that actually mean? When a meteorologist says this, what should I be looking for?
Well, let's get to it. What are those words that we can expect to hear throughout this next hurricane season?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of them might sound familiar. So I figured we'll go over the words first, then I'll show you just a few pictures. Buzzsaw. This is something that it's almost slang, if you will. When we see or say a buzzsaw hurricane, we're looking at satellite imagery that looks like a buzzsaw. And sometimes it's indicative of a storm that's so powerful, so destructive, that if that hurricane comes on shore and it's got that buzzsaw look, it's unfortunately tearing up everything in its direct path like a buzzsaw. But buzzsaw is really that satellite imagery. I'll just preview that picture. You can see it looks like a buzzsaw, right? This is Hurricane Floyd back in 1999 in September, that Florida there on your left. But the buzzsaw is something that you'll hear us talking about, but not in a positive way. When we see a hurricane get this look, unfortunately, it means it is becoming strong.
Intense.
Yeah, very intense, powerful, destructive. A fish storm. This is something that you've probably heard a lot of meteorologists say before. If it's a storm that's out in the ocean, but not expected to hit land. So basically a fish storm, meaning it's going to disrupt, you know, the fish community out there. But we've kind of toned that down a little bit over the past few years, because something that gets overlooked with these tropical storms and hurricanes out in the ocean that, yes, won't have a huge threat to a lot of people if they're not going to impact land, as they do disrupt shipping routes. They disrupt, you know, the cruise lines, travel issues, going back and forth over some of those, the big and popular spots in the ocean for those cruise ships to go. So yes, it's still a fish storm if it's a storm that's not expected to hit land, but we're kind of saying that because we don't want to ignore the fact that there will be some disruptions. Saffir-Simpson. Esme, have you heard of this one before?
I have not.
Okay, this is just the fancy name for the scale that we use to convey the risk strength of hurricanes. So category 1, category 2, category 3, that sound familiar?
Yes.
It's basically that. So the Saffir-Simpson scale ranks 1 to 5 the scale of a hurricane, but it's only based on the winds, only based on the maximum sustained winds, which is a problem because if you think about a hurricane, that ain't just a wind problem.
No.
That can be storm surge, that can be inland flooding, that can be coastal flooding, that can be tornadoes. So the Saffir-Simpson scale is based on wind for, let's say, category 1, right? That would start at 74 mile per hour winds and then go up from there to a category 2, category 3, category 4. The Saffir-Simpson, it was 2 meteorologists that came together and made this, one being Saffir, one being Simpson. But all that to say, the Saffir-Simpson scale is basically how we rate hurricanes, but it's only based on wind and it does not take into account those other impacts of a storm. So there's actually a lot of discussion right now in the meteorological community saying, do we stick with this? Because more often than not, unfortunately, it's water that hurts or worse more people than wind. I mean, storm surge is the biggest killer oftentimes when it comes to a hurricane or a tropical system, even of any sort making landfall. So just kind of a behind the scenes segment, if you will, about, yeah, there's some discussion within meteorologists saying, I don't know if this is a good representation, right? You could have a very big storm that's got, category 2 or category 3 winds. Well, let's say Harvey. Harvey was not a category 5 when it made landfall, yet those were category 5 impacts if you ask anybody in Houston who was there in 2017, right?
Flooding was horrible after.
Absolutely. And the scale doesn't even touch on rainfall or flooding. And so that's what I'm talking about. The things of, yes, the winds are tied with, heavy rainfall, stronger thunderstorms within the eye wall and that kind of thing. But it is what it is. We're still going to say category 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. There's no such thing as category 6 does not exist. Category 5 is as high as it goes. There's just a lot of discussion surrounding that.
Has there ever been a situation where a storm or meteorologists and scientists thought that a storm was even stronger than a category 5?
No, because it's kind of like an open-ended scale. I wish actually, let me look it up for you because this is a question we do get a lot. And a lot of people are thinking, well, why isn't there a category 6? Category 5 storms would be 157 mile per hour winds or stronger. So it's an open end. It's the same thing with like the tornado scale, an EF5, right? Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as an EF6. It's 5 is the most. And I think a lot of the times they just want to keep it as simple as possible. So they'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because it is very rare for sustained winds of 155, 57 miles per hour to be within a storm. So category 1 through 5 is going to encompass most of the storms that we see. So there's no point in going 6, 7, 8, right? Yeah. But we'll see. I mean, it could change in the future. Right now, there's no discussion about a category 6 hurricane, but we'll see.
The weather's always changing. So
it's always changing.
We never know.
Yeah. The stadium effect. So now for some not so scary stuff. The stadium effect is basically, and I'm sure you've seen photos like this before, when a hurricane hunter flies into a hurricane and they're in the eye, what happens is if you look out, the thunderstorm walls, the eye wall almost angles out like if you were standing on a field, a soccer field at Q2 looking up, right? That stadium effect. And I'm going to show you that here in a little bit.
Kind of like a cone.
Exactly. View. Yeah. It's got this state of you. Just imagine yourself standing on the middle of the field at the ground level, looking up into a stadium, and you see, the towering stands, except in this case, it'd be towering thunderstorms around you. Yeah. So the stadium effect, it's often seen by the hurricane hunters, but if for whatever reason you find yourself in the eye of a hurricane, you could potentially see it from the ground as well.
So the stadium effect and the eye of a hurricane are similar?
Similar in the fact that the stadium effect is just the visualization, right? Mm-hmm. The eye wall is what you're actually looking at. The eye wall is what you're looking at. Yeah, the eye of a hurricane is the middle where it's calm, where you can sometimes even see some sunshine in some of the bigger and stronger storms. But the eye wall is the ring of thunderstorms right around the eye. That's where the most intense thunderstorms are and the strongest winds of a hurricane. So eye right in the middle, completely calm, sinking air, sometimes sunshine. The ring around the eye, though, is chaos. That is where, unfortunately, you find the strongest, the meanest part of the storm. So the hurricane force winds, those can extend out a couple, 100 miles sometimes from a storm, 50 to 200, 300. Hurricane force would be 74 miles per hour or stronger. tropical storm force winds about 39 miles per hour to 73 miles per hour. So that's just something that we talk about when you sometimes hear us say, don't focus on the eye, focus on the impacts of the big storm. Because we could have a big storm that makes landfall in Houston, but the tropical storm force winds, which again, 40 to 75 miles per hour, could extend into Austin. That's a damaging wind threat, you know? So when you hear us talk about tropical storm winds, think, I would say 40 to 75 miles per hour, hurricane force winds, 74 miles per hour stronger.
Wow.
Outer bands, kind of self-explanatory. That's the outer fingerlings of a hurricane, dense lines of thunderstorms, and those are typically where we find the tornadoes, the outer bands interacting with the land. And then the hurricane hunters, I'm going to show you a picture of that here shortly, so I'll pause that one. The cone of uncertainty. This is something that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with when there's a forecast issued by the National Hurricane Center. They're the only ones who issue cones of uncertainty. It's a forecast of where we expect the center of the storm to go. Not the entire storm, just the middle of it. And that's a big misconception because people see the cone and they think, oh, well, I'm not in the cone. I don't have to worry. No. That's just where the middle is going to go. So that could mean the middle of this, storm is on the very edge of the cone, which means you got the half side of the storm that could potentially impact you. So cone of uncertainty, only the middle of this storm is what the forecast is for, not the entire storm.
I think I've heard meteorologists use cone of uncertainty most
Yes.
compared to all of these lingo words that we ran through.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I mean, it's maybe familiar. You'll hear it more when we talk about the maps and get further into this season. I think it'll start to ring a few bells. But these are things that sometimes I feel like I just throw out, and I'm like, oh wait, did they know that? Should I explain that more?
Well, hurricane hunters is one I'm really interested
Yes.
in.
Okay. So let me get to the pictures because as we talked about buzzsaw, the look of a true buzzsaw in some of the most destructive hurricanes, this one being Hurricane Floyd. And it's really the satellite imagery. That's what we use to look at hurricanes over the ocean. Hurricane hunters help as well, but we don't have a lot of data in the middle of the ocean to get a visual of these hurricanes and tropical storms. So we really rely on our satellites to give us a good idea of what those storms look like from above. Here's that stadium effect that we were talking about. Remember, if you were standing in the middle of a soccer field looking up at a stadium, so imagine this would be stands, right? The upper level decks and that kind of thing. This was actually a picture from Hurricane Beryl, Category 5 at the time. Last year, early July. It was not a Category 5 by the time it hit Houston. Thank goodness it had weakened to a Category 1. But this is what some of the strongest hurricanes, what the inside of them would look like if you were flying right through the middle of the eye. That stadium effect looking at the eye wall. That's the eye wall right there, that big, long, tall thunderstorm action.
What is the risks of flying into something like this?
Oh, girl. So, yeah, that brings in the hurricane hunters, right? These are specialized planes and very specialized people flying these planes. Sometimes there's two different groups here. There's the meteorologists and the pilots with NOAA. And there's also a piece of this that is recognized with the Air Force, the reconnaissance flights that go through. One of them is this one's based in Florida. The Air Force reconnaissance flight is based in Biloxi, Mississippi. And they'll go out and they'll purposely fly through these eye walls and these hurricanes to, one, find the center, and two, figure out what are the winds within these hurricanes. Underneath the belly of this plane, there's a hole, and it's really kind of a chute, that they can drop an instrument. We call it a drop sonde. They drop an instrument that goes out of the plane all the way down through that eye wall, and it measures how strong those winds are. And as we talked about, this could be in excess of 100 miles per hour. So they'll fly through, they'll fly above, but you're talking about insane winds in the vertical in some of these thunderstorms that make up that eye wall. I mean, 100 mile per hour winds going up and down with a plane flying through. So some of the videos are just nuts. I mean, you see everything in the plane bouncing, right? I mean, just thinking about it makes my tummy hurt because it's just so much turbulence. And it is, I think, a very important and almost like prideful job. Like these are the elite of the elite when it comes to those hurricane hunters, those pilots and meteorologists who are flying through these storms, and they'll fly through almost all of them that pose any sort of threat to the United States. But I think it's really cool. I would love to be able to one day maybe sit as a passenger in one of these, but maybe not like a big category 4 or 5. No, that's gonna really throw me around. Maybe just like a small category 1 tropical storm.
Well, these are not your average planes. They obviously have more protection.
Right.
They're built differently to sustain all of the winds that come with those hurricanes.
For sure. And I'm not, super as aware of the aviation terms as far as the planes go. I know there's 2 different types. There's these ones that almost have like a big belly and the propellers up on top, and then there's another that flies above these hurricanes, and it's super fast. It's the Gulf 4, I believe, jet, and it can fly very fast, very much in and around these hurricanes. And I think the Gulf 4 jet is one of the only aircrafts that has been on almost every Atlantic-based hurricane or tropical system, tropical storm to hurricane in the last 10, 20 years. So it's gotten a lot of runs going back and forth. And it's not, hurricane hunters don't just fly in hurricanes. Sometimes they'll do atmospheric rivers on the West Coast in the wintertime and such. They'll go and do the Pacific too. It's not just the Atlantic. They'll fly through some Eastern Pacific hurricanes as well. But I just think this is such a cool resource. It's such an important resource that we have to get that data from the inside of the storms. And it takes a very special group of men and women to be able to withstand some of that turbulence in these storms.
Is there any other type of instrument that they use during hurricanes to measure the wind speeds, or is this plane the only thing that they have?
When it's out in the middle of the ocean, this is the primary. Well, I should take that back. Satellites are the primary. Those are the pictures. We can get a picture every 5 minutes of the ocean during hurricane season, seeing where these storms are going. But the hurricane hunters kind of give us the goods of inside the storm. There's a lot of new technology being developed, one called a sail drone, which we've done a few stories on here at KXAN. It's basically a drone that's riding the waves of the ocean, that's collecting data and transmitting that back to the National Hurricane Center. There's weather observation sites along the coast. Oftentimes what happens is we'll get some really good data up until the storm surge comes, and then they come underwater. It's the same thing with the cameras, right? Or we'll lose connection. So once these hurricanes get on land, or even within reach of some of our land-based Doppler radars, we can get some really good estimates on the winds and that such. But when these things are way out there in the middle of the Atlantic, the hurricane hunters are crucial in figuring out not only how strong are those winds, but as I mentioned, the center of the storm, because the center of the storm is crucial for us to put into our models correctly. So our computer models spit out an accurate forecast on the back end. That middle part is what can make and break our forecast. If we're wrong on where the middle of that storm is, then the forecast that gets spit out from the back end of the computers is going to be wildly inaccurate as well.
There's a lot that goes into measuring hurricane speeds, all of that good stuff. But since we are still in hurricane season, I haven't heard much out here amongst our meteorologists, but what is our hurricane season looking like right now?
We are looking at an overall active hurricane season. It's interesting right now that there's nothing worth monitoring in the Atlantic. I mean, it is quiet. We did have a big plume of Saharan dust roll through, impacted Florida. Didn't necessarily see a whole lot of those impacts here in Texas. But oftentimes when we see those plumes of Saharan dust move through, it mitigates a lot of that development in the Atlantic, in the main development region of the Atlantic. However, the Pacific, having no problems.
Wow.
The Pacific, we've had Tropical Storm Alvin, didn't really do much. Tropical Storm Barbara, which briefly became Hurricane Barbara, our first hurricane of the season. It has since fizzled. It lost its tropical storm status over the last 12 hours. And then now post-tropical system Cosme, which was Tropical Storm Cosme. But as you can see, there's 2 more areas of disturbed weather right behind this system. I mean, we've got one with high odds of becoming further organized just off the coast of Mexico. That's the red X. And then we've got one right behind it with low odds right now, but it just formed over the last, 12, 24 hours that this popped up, of 2 areas that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring for potential development in the Eastern Pacific. There seems to be a sweet spot right there off the coast of Mexico, because all of these storms, Alvin, Cosme, Barbara, have all kind of initiated here before they moved off towards the north and west and further organized. But and something we'll watch it. We do know we have not yet seen that first name in the Atlantic, which would be Andrea, but we are definitely chipping away at those Pacific names. The next, whether it's one of these or not, would be Delilah, followed by Eric, Flossie, Gil, Henriette, Evo, Julia, and Kiko. So those would be names that you would hear in the Eastern Pacific, which again, we do see more storms on average in the Eastern Pacific. That's why there's 24 names on this list versus the 21 names you see on the Atlantic list of names. But sometimes those Pacific storms can get, that moisture gets wrapped around and it gets thrown at Texas, and we could see a whole lot of heavy rain. So it does bear watching.
And how much longer do we have in our hurricane season this year?
Ooh, we got a long way to go, girl. We have, let's see. So they both end November 30th. The Eastern Pacific starts May 15th. So they got a 2-week head start on the Atlantic. So we're about a month in, almost a month in the Eastern Pacific. But we are still above average. We typically see that third named storm the beginning of July. So these storms are coming in a little faster than average. And then in the Atlantic, that runs through runs through November 30th as well.
Well, time is flying by. We're already almost mid-June.
Crazy.
So we're almost getting through that hurricane season.
Yeah, and it is very back heavy, unfortunately. It takes a little while for the ocean to warm up. There's a delay in the sun heating the land and heating the water. So we do tend to see a little bit more activity ramp up towards end of August, September, October. Mm-hmm. It normally starts pretty quiet, but we know Mother Nature's in charge. We're just here to hold on and keep up.
Yes, and we do have a line of storms coming to the Central Texas, Austin area late tonight, right?
Yes, and I'll just finish off with your 7-day forecast here because it was really nice to get that rainfall this morning, but we are not done. We've got more isolated storms being very hit and miss to begin in the afternoon. This evening into tonight, overnight is where that 70% chance kicks in. There is a low severe risk, 1 out of 5 for most of us, slightly higher in our southeastern counties. But the flood risk is moderate. That's a 3 out of 4 tonight. That's a pretty big deal here in Central Texas to be in that level of a flood risk. So that's my biggest concern overnight into tomorrow. I'm hoping timing-wise, because this is falling after dark when a lot of us are already home and the safest place we can be, that we shouldn't have too many issues. But we do have the potential for more heavy rain today and tomorrow. Rain chances slowly starting to taper getting into the weekend, and that allows our temperatures to pop back into the 90s.
And we can't stress this enough. If there is a flood risk, please stay home, stay off the roads, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear us talk about every time turn around, don't drown, yet every season, every year, we find someone who thinks they're bigger than Mother Nature, and they test it and they put themselves in a bad situation or worse. And I think one of the things that I think about too is, it's one thing to put yourself in a dumb situation like that, but if you're needing to be rescued, you're putting in law enforcement, you're putting rescuers in a bad situation as well. So we just want to make sure everybody knows that it's that kind of level, that kind of concern later tonight, because we've gotten so much rain recently over the last 3 to 4 days that it's not going to take a lot for that water to start to run off and pool and pond in some spots that it shouldn't be in.
Yeah, and I'm already seeing little ponds and lakes near my neighborhood that are getting fuller and fuller. When the start of the summer, they were completely dry.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, May is our rainy time. I know we're a couple weeks into June, but whether it comes late, early, or, middle of the night, we'll take it. We need it. Yeah. I'm a little worried that it's going to come down too fast today, and that's when we run into problems.
Well, for anyone who wants to keep track of the storms tonight or future weather activity, where can they do that?
KXAN.com, good resource. The KXAN weather app, I would say arguably one of the best resources. And then, with this kind of event, we're going to be in the Weather Center all night long. So check back in for updates. We've got KXAN News at 11 a.m. coming up. We'll be back at 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and I will see you guys tomorrow morning at 4:30 a.m.
And we also have our KXAN Plus streaming app. If you want to download that on your TV, if you have a Roku, Fire TV, or Apple TV, we have our app available completely for free, and you can watch our wall-to-wall coverage tonight if we do end up having that severe risk.
Yeah, absolutely. All the different ways, and as we say, multiple resources to get weather alerts. That's what we encourage.
Yes, that's what we do. We do have your article that we briefly mentioned before this stream started. It's on our website, KXAN.com, titled hurricane season lingo, similar to this stream. I lost my mouse. Okay, there
There
we
it
go.
goes.
And we have all the graphics that we talked about, as well as all of the names or the words that you explained here as well, right?
Yep, absolutely. Everything's on there. And as we always say, if you've got questions, let me know. Kristen.currie@KXAN.com is my email. Happy to answer anything that you are more curious about.
Well, thank you for joining us here on KXAM Plus, Kristen. It was a pleasure to have you back and to start our Kristen's Classroom segments again.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.